You're live. Now we're live.
Good morning, everybody. Tuesday.
Good afternoon.
Do that every time.
Every time.
So, here we are. So, I'm Tara, and this is Alan from Inspired Outcomes. And this is going on, I think, week maybe 10 or 11 or...
Way more than that. We started in the third week of March.
And so what we've been doing here is just using our experience and our education in NLP and bringing it to the current situation. So Alan and I both actively coach and we train, and so we are sort of listening to what's going on out there. And originally this was very COVID-centric. It was meant we thought about doing this just in service of people being at home and being quarantined, and how could we offer something, and our expertise is NLP, so we thought that's what we can offer. And so we started just talking about some of the things that we heard people were challenged with, and giving a different perspective, an NLP perspective, on how you can sort of take control of your own mind and apply some of the techniques in your life to make things a lot easier for you. And so now we've had a really positive response, and we enjoy doing it. And so
Here we are.
Tuesdays at noon. We'll always be here, and we're just kind of taking it week by week, and we talk about what we think is really relevant at the time through the filter of NLP. So welcome.
So we started, it's a lot of weeks ago. It was the third week of March, as Tara said, and we started teaching some techniques that really help us manage our emotional states. Now, so many people, if you go on YouTube or if you Google managing emotional states, there are a lot of great messages out there. So we're sharing some that work with us and with our clients all the time. And the three fundamental ones, the first was what's called a break state. This has been a key piece of NLP, a pattern interrupter, a break state, since the very inception of NLP. How do we break a person's emotional state and get them calm? So the break state that we use, and it's based on moving from one representational system, emotions or kinesthetic, into another representational system, visuals. And how we do that is we look up and we imagine seeing a billboard with our telephone numbers on it. And we stay there until we can actually see a billboard with our telephone number on it. Now, it may be like a billboard going by on the side of the road, or it may be like a road sign with your telephone number on it. However you see it is perfect for you. I really like playing with it by asking people, what colors are your numbers? What colors are the background, right, of your billboard? And then I know when they're giving me colors like that, and I'd ask you to do it too, I know you're really seeing it. As soon as we do that, if we stay focused on our telephone number and we've created this billboard with colorful numbers on a background, then we read the telephone number backwards. We're engaging a different part of our brain. And that breaks the emotional state we are in right away. Now, it puts us in a state of kind of wonder because you're reading your telephone number backwards. Cool thing to do at that point is to stay looking up and go into peripheral vision. All peripheral vision is keeping your head and eyes steady, focus on a single point. And as you stare at that point, you'll start to notice that everything in front of you, for as far back as you can see forward, up and down forward, starts to come into focus, even though you're staring straight ahead. So now you're seeing everything in the moment. And as you see everything in the moment, then I would ask you to become aware of all the sounds. Now, our air conditioning, I think, just kicked in. I can hear that. I can hear cars going by on the road, and I can hear people moving on the floor above us. I think I can hear our kids outside the door as well. So now I'm seeing everything, and you're seeing everything in front of you, and you're hearing everything in this moment. And as you do that, now feel the seat you're sitting on, feel the surface under your feet, feel the clothes on your back, feel the air temperature, and just notice what you're feeling. Now you're hearing and seeing and feeling in this moment. Eckhart Tolle writes about being in the now. This is being in the now. And if you stay here for a moment and become aware of your breathing, be very, very aware. You'll notice that it's slowing down, and it'll drop into you from your chest into your diaphragm. And we know from hypnosis that's a very relaxing state. If you stay there a little longer, become aware of your heart rate, of your heart beating, and notice that it's slowing down. Now this relaxation. You broke your state. Now you're in peripheral vision. You're seeing, hearing, feeling everything in the moment. Your heart rate's slowing down. You're in a very calm state. And then the third step is to move to a resourceful step. And we use our resource anchor, a trigger point that we've installed in us that move us into a resourceful state. So I just held on to mine, and away I go. Now I'm in a very resourceful state. We encourage everybody to practice that as many times as you can in a day. Connect that trigger point to massive amounts of positive emotions: happiness, laughter, confidence, energy, abundance, and be able to move easily and effortlessly from negative emotional states by breaking them, going to peripheral vision, and moving easily into a resourceful state. The more times you do it, the more times it becomes your pattern, easily. Now, there's massive amounts of benefits from moving from negative emotional states to positive emotional states. There's certainly a benefit for everybody around you, but internally, inside your own system, the chemicals that come with negative emotions are appropriate for the negative emotion when the emotion is warranted. So as Tara always says, when the saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, you need adrenaline. You need a little bit of fear, and you need to get motoring. But if you're sitting at home watching the TV or surfing on your Facebook, and you're starting to feel fear of a disease that may or may not get you, and you're starting to get elevated levels of the chemicals associated with fear in your body while you're sitting at home in the comfort of your home looking at your iPhone, that's inappropriate.
We talked about the effects of stress on your body last time, and it really has a negative effect on your whole system, including your immune system.
And that system is your sympathetic nervous system. It rises to the occasion. However, in rising to the occasion, it produces some chemicals that allow you to take action. Sitting on your couch, surfing your iPhone, you do not want those chemicals coursing through your body. By breaking your state, moving into peripheral vision, and then going into a resourceful state, you actually initiate your parasympathetic system, which are good chemicals. And so we really, really encourage you to do that.
So today we're going to talk about choice. So
whose choice was that?
All of you are aware right now of what's going on in the world in terms of disruption. We seem to be at a point where things are, the States is on fire, literally on fire, because of people's lack of freedom. We have a country that has been under lockdown and is now, it's like there's so much frustration and misunderstanding and confusion and intolerance, and now we're witnessing pure hatred and evil and really, really, really intensified pain. And I want to just start by saying, one of the things that is most imperative, that is most important to the human condition, there's a lot of people who will say to you, who have been through really horrific things. We often refer people to Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, who went through the Holocaust. And he talks about what can't be taken away from you is your choice to respond.
It's the last of all of your freedoms.
Yeah.
No one can take away your freedom to choose.
So as human beings, what matters most to us above all things is our own autonomy, our own ability to choice. It's why the worst possible thing you can do to somebody is to take away that freedom, take away their ability to respond to the situation, take away their freedoms. And sometimes that's physical freedoms, and sometimes that's cultural freedoms, and sometimes that's, religious freedoms, or, whatever they may be. When we take freedoms away from people, that is the worst thing you can do to their humanity. So,
and in fact, the founding constitutions of the most progressive countries enshrine freedoms, the freedom to choose, inside their constitutions, right? They embed them in there. Canada certainly has that. United States has that.
So we are having a big conversation right now amongst white people, amongst privileged white people like ourselves. The conversation right now that I have seen, which is both so optimistic and exciting, and yet also devastating to recognize how many of us just haven't figured out how to be more than simply anti-racist, right? Or non-racist. And yet I haven't. I speak personally, and I know just in my conversations this week that there are a lot of people who feel like me. It's a matter of not knowing how to put our caring or our concern into some sort of actual action that can create difference. And so the conversations that we want to jump into right now is that we have an ability to laser in on this sense of choice, this sense of autonomy, of being able to, in every single second of your life, you have the choice of how to respond what's happening to you. So you don't have the choice to determine whether or not the sun's going to shine or whether it's going to rain or whether that person is going to say this thing or that thing to you. But every single circumstance you are in, when you have your full faculties, you can respond to that situation. And so we're going to zone in today on just how to do that, how to slow down, because I think the first thing that I know how to do personally, as someone who is so moved by what's going on, who is so desperate to be able to contribute in a way that is meaningful and that isn't going to be redundant or offensive and insulting. I think sometimes, when you try and launch into something that you don't quite understand, I think I've been, anyone who has followed me, my posts this week have been a commitment to learning, to acknowledging that there is a gap between my own ignorance and experience and what needs to be done. And
Yes.
So my commitment is to hopefully figure out how to make the gap smaller so that I and my family can contribute in a positive way. So where we're starting.
So what Tara's just expressed there is her choice in response to what's happening externally, to events that happen in a faraway city in another country. But she's making a choice of how to respond. And that choice is unique to her. It's very unique to her. And we're not here to talk about what to do. We're not talking about the outcome. We're talking about the ability. And I think, so much of the literature talks us to be grateful. To be grateful for what we have, to be grateful for this. I think the thing we need to be grateful for is our choice, our freedom of choice. And whether you take it on a societal level, as Tara is describing, and then a reaction to what's happening societally, or if you take it into what you put on the plate in front of you, acknowledging that you have choice in everything you do. Now, you can choose to hold your breath. You'll only hold it for a while, and then your autonomic nervous system will take over and insist that you breathe, and it will insist your heart. But everything heart beats, but everything outside of that, you have choice. When I hear clients say, I had no choice, I challenge them right away. Why specifically didn't you have choice? Now,
I want to jump in there just for a second, because that's your cue. So if you're looking for a way to make sense of this for yourself personally, take a snapshot of the last 24 hours, and if you can come up with anything in the last 24 hours in which you would defend that you didn't have a choice, right? So some of you may be able to come up with instances or situations where you could honestly, you would start to argue, I didn't have a choice, it's what I had to do. That is your bell or red flag or whatever, that you're dealing with something that if you go underneath that one, you are going to find some fascinating stuff about your own beliefs, your own values, and what's in the way. Because no matter what it is, you did actually, in fact, make a choice.
Yeah.
Can I give a quick example?
Absolutely.
Here? So I was working at a workshop that I did recently, and there was a woman who was in a relationship that was unhealthy, and she had no means to get out of the relationship. And she wasn't being physically abused, but it was an unpleasant relationship. And so she gave me all the reasons why she couldn't exit, and I accept those, of course, right? That's her reasons and everything else. So where we got to was, she started by saying, I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I have to do is, take care of his breakfast or his feed or his food. And when we were able to change that, I worked with this woman for a couple of days. And by the time we got to the end and she recognized, here's what's actually happening. I'm getting up in the morning and I have a choice to make. Because she certainly didn't have to make his food, right? She certainly didn't have to make him breakfast. But these were all of the options in front of her. And what she finally sort of admitted was that things actually go a lot easier. It's a lot more pleasant for her if she chooses to make breakfast. And so once she got on top of that single decision, so she could have chosen not to make him breakfast, she did not like the consequence of that for herself.
Stay there. When a person says, I had no choice, what they're really saying is I could not accept the consequence of that choice. So I chose this path. What they're really saying is, they're actually saying I had a choice, but I could not accept the consequence of that. Now, in our society, we have laws, right? We stay within the boundaries of the laws because most of us don't like the consequence of breaking the law.
So just to finish that one, it's so important to put this all in that bigger picture. In this particular case, by getting a handle on that first decision and changing the language inside her head from, I have to do this, I have no choice, to, I actually have, I don't know, I think by the end we were able to list like 100 other things she could do, right? More than. She could do infinite other things. This is what she chooses to do. By taking control of that herself, what she realized was happening, and I've talked to her since, is that when she made that decision, it put her back in control. Now she was making choices for herself. She was recognizing the benefit to herself from that choice. And slowly by slowly, this was not someone who was in a position yet. She wasn't there yet in her journey to be able to make some of the bigger choices that might have been better for her. But this small one, and she started to bring those into every moment of her day, recognizing that everything was a choice. That filled her with a sense of autonomy. That got her back into herself to stop being a victim and to start recognizing her own power. And from that place, as the weeks went on, then she could make bigger and bigger and bigger decisions for herself from that place, where she's going to get herself wherever she chooses, however that works out, right? She's going to get herself into a place. But it starts with these tiny little moments when we recognize that we are at choice all of the time.
And you can take this into any realm you chose. I come from a military background. And in the first Gulf War, there was a military sergeant who refused to be treated with Lariam. Now, he was ordered to take it. He refused to take it. And he ultimately didn't like it because at the time, many soldiers were having adverse reactions to it. He chose, even though he wore the uniform, understood orders, he also understood something more intrinsic, that he had a duty that when he confronted something or when he came up against something that seemed inappropriate, to confront it in a way. So he actively disobeyed the order, stating that he was disobeying the order for health reasons of himself and the people he commanded. And he was willing to accept the consequences of that. To me, that is a great example of choice and consequence. And on the note of consequence, there are negative consequences and there's positive consequences. And our two motivators in life is to move away from pain and move towards pleasure. So when we're making choice, when we say we have no choice, what we're really saying is, I need to stay away from that pain of that choice. And we're choosing the lesser pain or the pleasure of this moment.
So just stop and think about that for a moment. Because that duality is absolute.
Absolute.
You can only be motivated those two ways. You are either motivated by the pleasure something brings you, or by the pain you're avoiding. Those are the only two ways you can be motivated. It's not always 100% one way or the other. Sometimes I will tell you that, like, when I drive my kids to their soccer game or whatever, I'm, 50% of me is motivated toward the opportunity and possibility we're providing for them, and 50% of me is motivated by, like,
the guilt of
them,
not taking them,
not bringing them, or so it can be sort of split. But you're always dealing with those two dualities, and we know from experience of working with our clients is that people who live their life, when we ask them to do an audit of their life and to recognize how they're motivated, the clients who come back and say, 80% of what I did, Tara, was a move away from. Like, I'm spending 80% of my life just doing things because I'm avoiding what I don't want.
Correct.
That is so different from somebody who comes back and says, my life is like 70% of my life, everything I'm doing is because I'm moving toward the pleasure it brings me. Those are two different lives, man. And sometimes we don't even realize, most of the time I would say, most of us don't have that frame to do it in. So one of the things I would encourage you to do is to take stock of the next hour or 12 hours or 24 hours. And just, I often tell people to put a little dot, with their pen on their hand. And every time they look at it, just ask yourself the question, whatever the last action or word or whatever I just did I do that because I'm moving toward, or I'm moving away from?
How did I make the decision? How did I make the choice to do what I did? Was I moving away from pain or was I moving towards pleasure? The act of knowing what's motivating you and the act of knowing that you had choice changes everything. Now, we have clients who are very, very stuck. They're in stuck places. I deal with people who are traumatized. Tara works with people who are stuck in transition, moving through life. These people are very stuck. And we know from the teaching of others, our mentors and the people we learn from, is that when we get stuck in negative emotional states and we give up choice, those neurological pathways to the negative emotional states get fired over and over. And what they say in neurology is what gets fired gets wired. More neurons get attracted to that pathway. So our choice to stay where we are actually emboldens or builds the negative state. Joe Dispenza talks about us getting both addicted to our negative emotional state because we're certain of it. We're certain of that. We're not certain of this over here, what this other thing is. And, he says you are the placebo. In fact, his first book was called You Are the Placebo. When you choose something different, you have an effect on yourself. So our thinking affects our biology. What we choose to think about affects our biology. So if the last thing you do at night is surf the negative news on your iPhone or your Android, I don't want to pick on iPhone all the time or whatever phone you're using, but if the last thing you do is focus on the negativity of the world before you go to sleep, that's the last messaging you're getting. And that's a choice, to choose to focus on that negativity or focus on the positivity of the world. Tara said just the other day, the overwhelming amount of negative information between COVID, the events in Minneapolis, the uprising across the country, we need to be aware of it. We need to acknowledge it. We need to learn from it. We also have to be aware of the positive messaging, the choosing, okay, and I love how Tara started this. What she chose to do as a result was to look inward. What are my thoughts? What's my understanding of what racism or any other bias is? Religious, gender, whatever. What's my real understanding of these issues? And in doing that, becoming more aware of who we are. That's a profound choice. Another choice could have been whatever, right?
I'm going to tell you a tiny little story because I think it's hilarious. And it fits in so beautifully. And it's a little story, but it fits so well. We live in a little house, and last year
wee little house.
It bothered me because we have this garden leading up to our house, and it filled with dandelions, right? Like just filled with weeds. And I never found the time. I just never found the moment or the whatever to like schedule a time a week where every week I would go out and pick but it bothered me every day. I would walk up the path to our house and it would just piss me off. So this year, I just had the coolest experience. I mean, we live with these frames, right? Al and I do our very, very best, and we don't do it anywhere near perfectly, but
we work at it.
Lord, we don't, but
it's a work in process.
We try, and at least we have the frames that bring beautiful little moments like this sometimes. So I was walking up the other day, and we have, those of you who've been listening to us probably know about our bunny problems.
Bunny problems.
So we got two little bunnies.
Tara's bunny maternity ward. Her choice to become a maternity ward for bunnies.
So we now have a lot of bunnies. Well, we did have a lot more bunnies, but now we're down to 4. So we have 4 bunnies. And the bunnies, I was going to the grocery store and buying, all sorts of green things for them to eat. But now that it's spring, what they love most are dandelion leaves and dandelion flowers. This is like a bunny's diet. I hope nobody proves me wrong here. So comments. But this is what they love to eat. And so this year, I actually started walking up the path and got really excited because we're spending probably, like $10 a week or something just on green things, maybe more. And this
we have the healthiest bunnies on the planet. My choice.
I walked up my pathway and I started noticing that the dandelions were growing. And my first thought was like, oh, cool. Pretty soon I'm going to stop having to buy anything for these bunnies. I'm just going to pick it. And so since then, it's been, a month now, and I have been every day, I go for a run in the morning, I come back, and on my way up the path, I pick up all of the dandelion leaves. And in fact, I usually have to go like source outwards into the greater lawn to get more. But every single dandelion, and I thought this is so fascinating because I'm doing it, first of all, every day. But last year, it was all to avoid what I didn't want, right? Last year, it was all about getting rid of these, dandelions that were pissing me off, and I couldn't get motivated to do it. This year, every single day, I think, awesome, this is for my rabbits, so I collect all this rabbit food, and there isn't a weed in our garden right now because I've picked them all. And that sense of, now I have a purpose for it, and now my purpose is 100% moved toward. There's no part of me anymore that is trying to get rid of these weeds for a negative reason. I'm using the weeds for a positive reason. I bring them home and feed our rabbits. And I thought, this is so profound in terms of what I think so many people are like. 2020 has been this bizarre year, but I with every bone in my body, I hope that we are getting closer to change through all of this difficulty that we faced. And if we can do this, if we can look at those weeds that before were weeds, like for me, it was like, don't be unkind, like it was really important to me that I was never doing any harm. The switch into like, but what can I do in every moment, in every choice that I make, because I want to contribute to something that I didn't maybe feel I had as much responsibility to contribute to, and now I do.
Picking the dandelions to make it prettier wasn't a motivator. There was pain. She didn't like the dandelions, but it wasn't pain enough, and there was no motivator big enough. Now, feeding the bunnies is exciting. So the motivator, you saw Tara's motivation, she'll move towards pleasure a lot faster than she'll move away from pain. And it's while a small example of feeding bunnies and dandelions, it's a great example of when we get into our motivation, into that, we'll call it a sweet spot, it's easy and effortlessly to make good choices.
We're 12:28.
Cool.
So
I think Tara gave you a task. I think Tara gave you a great exercise earlier. Is just put a dot on your hand, and when you look down, smile, and just review the last 3 choices you've made. The last 3 decisions. Say, why did I choose that decision? Why did I choose that lunch? Did I do it mostly for pain or mostly? And acknowledge that it was a choice. Acknowledge. Now, and acknowledge when you're saying, I don't have a choice. Especially when you say things like, my boss made me do it, or I had to do it for the kids. Acknowledge that you made a choice because the alternative had a consequence that wasn't okay for you.
It's powerful.
And I think that is true empowerment.
It is. It's so important. So in my weed metaphor.
You're back doing your weeds, huh?
Well, no, but I mean those choices that I was, if the weeds before in me were like apathy or ignorance or just like not noticing enough or not paying enough attention or whatever it was. And if now what I can do is I can move toward like how can I pay attention to every choice that I'm making right now and ask myself the question of, am I making this choice? How am I making this choice? How am I motivated? And then what are the consequences of my doing this or not doing this? And I think you could do it on the little minute things. If you did it just 2 or 3 times a day, even to stop and notice, I guarantee it would create such a change. And if you would report back to us, if you would be willing to share with us, like come into our, I don't know, how do people communicate with us? Sam,
they can put messages on Facebook if they're seeing Facebook.
Yeah,
they can email us.
Just personal messages to us. And tell us about what you're noticing. It would be so meaningful to us to be able to share that, to be able to reflect on it, to be able to bring it into our work that we share with others, to just see what's out there. Everyone, the ideas coming out for people. And I think the connections that are being made and the choice people are taking in their own lives is something that we're compelled right now to amplify and make it as big as we can. Or if you're challenged with this, guys, if you're challenged with this at all, if this doesn't make sense to you, or if you're not sure how to do this and you want some guidance, we do free consults. Just call us and talk to us.
There's a link on our homepage. The first link, click here, 30-minute consult with Tara or I, whoever you choose. Cool. Last thing, on Tara's coaching page, so if you go to inspiredoutcomes.ca and then go to Tara's counseling and coaching page, there's a link to an article on never having to say sorry.
No.
What's the title? Give me the right title.
The freedom of never blaming anyone ever for anything ever again.
Yeah, and it's all about choice. The power of choice, the power of being a cause. So say,
and guys, you know what?
Say the title again.
The freedom of never blaming anyone ever for anything ever again.
Beautiful.
I also have a hypnosis. I have a little meditation called Staying at Cause. We call it being at cause when you're making choices. And I have a meditation, a hypnosis, which we will get available on the site as well, a free download that you can listen to. It's like a 8 or 10 minute recording.
Powerful.
Okay.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. See you next Tuesday. Take Action Tuesday. Cheers.